In what passes for statesmanship today, we're going to take a look at several examples of some in government who want to get their way by hook or by crook. These efforts are not for your benefit, but to further accumulate power in Washington, D.C. We'll look at these next on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Well, hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel with the Constitution Study here once again, where we read and study the Constitution and teach the rising generation to be free. As always, you can find out more, follow what's going on at constitutionstudy.com. We've got a lot going on. I've got some things I'm going to start announcing soon. Hopefully some other classes and mentoring programs. So you can follow that over at the Constitution Study and keep up with what's going on. Sign up for the mailing list, get a free ebook, and you'll be notified as I announce new products. I also want to thank those who've been supporting the work that we're doing, that have been helping out. It does take a lot. There's a lot of time and effort and work and money that goes into putting these podcasts together. And I want to thank those who have stepped up to make it happen and to make sure it continues on. I also want to thank those that stop by and say hello when I'm visiting different cities at conferences or events and come up and say hello. It really means a lot for me to know that people are out there listening. And I always encourage questions, and I love when people ask questions in person. There's just something special about this. So, with that said, I want to take a look at some of these examples. I call it just changing the rules. If you don't get what you want, well, then change the rules. Now, to a certain extent, that's okay if everybody agrees to a new set of rules. But as we'll see, that isn't always the case. And I want to start today. Let's take a look. We're going to start with the Electoral College. There's been a lot of talk about that. I've done podcasts on the National Popular Vote movement, the constitutional amendment to abolish the Electoral College. But what I find interesting, what I want to look at here is, why is it only people who have lost a recent presidential election that seem to want to abolish the Electoral College? When a certain side wins, I don't seem to hear a lot of people complaining about the Electoral College. It's only when they lose. Now, I had a lot of people say, yeah, but they won the popular vote. There is no popular vote. As I wrote in my article, Disassembling the Republic of Good Intentions, there is no popular vote for President of the United States. It's done by states. States are granted electors. Those electors are chosen in a manner the state determines. And, we've kind of lost all this. It's Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 says, I hope I get to the right, that each state shall appoint in such manner as a legislature thereof may direct a number of electors. See, each state gets electors, and they're appointed based on that legislature. Now, I agree there are problems with how some of these electors how the electors are being chosen, and even how their vote is being controlled. But that's not a problem with the Electoral College. That's a problem with the states. See, the states have chosen to select their electors by popular vote, which I don't see as a problem. It was actually similar to a lot of what was considered in the Constitutional Convention, but they do it for pledged electors. And I think that's where we run into problems. You see, the original plan was you would pick somebody in your district who you trusted to vote for president, and then they would be campaigned. They would be the ones that would consider the candidates and vote. Now you're voting for electors who have already made up their mind. They've pledged themselves based on party. And I think that's a problem with the system. But related to what I'm talking about today, it's this idea that, the Electoral College, people have lost because of the Electoral College, and they want to get rid of it. And they never seem to ask, well, why was the Electoral College put there in the first place? Why do they want to get rid of this bulwark against democracy in America? Well, first of all, they think it's undemocratic. Yeah, on purpose. But mostly what it was is give more influence to areas of the country that they control politically. That's why you see the vast majority of the groups and people that are supporting this are from one political party. So let's see, what's next? Oh yeah, packing the courts. Yeah, so this came up a little while back, and they always start with the Supreme Court, but there are those that want to pack the courts. Now, what do I mean? The idea is Congress determines how many seats there are in the Supreme Court, what inferior courts there are, how many seats there are, and they say, well, if we get to add to those courts, we can, add seats, we can pick people who will give decisions the way we want them to. See, the reason this is such a big deal is because so much of the political gains in recent decades have come not through the legislature, not through the bureaucracy, but through the judicial branch. In other words, illegally. Activist courts have set aside the Constitution to support these agendas, and those people who have pushed those agendas and are seeing those agendas may be in danger want to pack the court so that their pet projects don't get overturned. Now, this is by no means the first time politicians have tried to pack the court. In fact, it goes all the way back to 1800 when John Adams lost the 1800 presidential election. I think it was 1801 maybe, that he tried to pack the courts before President Jefferson took office. And this actually led to the Supreme Court case, Marbury versus Madison. You may have heard of it. You may have been told what it says is not accurate, but I have another article that talks about that as well up on the website, constitutionstudy.com. And then one of the more well-known ones is in the 1930s, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he was upset with the Supreme Court because they kept looking at his New Deal and saying, no, that's unconstitutional. It's illegal. You can't do that. You are not allowed to do that. So what he tried to do was pack the courts. See, a lot of what's taught in school is that FDR's plan was a savior for America. But if you look at a lot of the research, it was economically destructive, it was unconstitutional, and it was illegal. And as a thank you to the courts for doing their job, for giving their opinion about laws and programs, the president tried to convince Congress to allow him to appoint new justices. Don't get your way? We'll pick new people. Now, presumably, he would pick people who are more in keeping with his socialist, centralized government mentalities or affinities. Now, FDR's plan to pack the court failed. He did not get to appoint new justices. He didn't get new additional justices, but he did get to appoint 8 of the 9 justices on the court. That's the advantage of sitting for over 12 years. So while FDR's plan to pack the court failed, he did have a huge influence. And he made a very long-lasting change on not only how the court views its role in government, but our view of the court as well. They've gone from being a bulwark against an out-of-control executive or legislature to a political entity where we talk about judges based on not their political, so much their political party, but the political party of the president that appointed them, and we tend to judge them based on how well they match that president's political points of view. So taking a page from history's playbook, those who see the gains they have made illegally through the judicial branch in jeopardy, they want to re-rig the system to protect their oligarchy. That's what you have when you have a group of people ruling the country. It's an oligarchy. This view that the ends justify the means leads to the breaking of laws, the infringing on rights, and they believe that's okay because what they want to do is right. And the ends justify the means. We can break a law because what we want to do is right. Let's see. Next, let's take a look at lowering the voting age. Some people say demographics is destiny. That you can predict how people will vote based on some demographic chart. And if you look at the voting records of groups like African Americans and Latinos, or the differences between older and younger Americans, there is some logic to that. African Americans, Latinos vote heavily Democratic. Generally, most younger voters tend to vote more Democratic. And, so there's a certain general, it's proven to be true to a certain extent. It's not uniform, but there is some preference that way. So these people in general don't believe that younger people are actually more responsible. I mean, think about this logically. They're not saying that a 16-year-old is as responsible or more responsible for an 18-year-old, because most of the same people that are talking about lowering the voting age raised the drinking age from 18 to 21. See, most of them voted to allow children to remain on their parents' health insurance until the age of 26, not to be responsible for themselves. No, the real reason these people want younger people to vote is they tend to vote more socialist, progressive, central government control. In other words, more tyranny. You see, those who've had to live with the consequences of these policies, they tend to look at it going, I don't think I like that idea. People that have actually had to pay taxes, had to run a business, had to deal with the regulatory state, they're not as interested in socialist, progressive, centralized government control. But if you're young, why would you be surprised if someone who is young would tend to lead more Washington centralized control? I mean, medical studies show that teenagers tend to react strongly and emotionally to perceived injustices. So when you can rile them up, all those hormones just impel them to act, and very few of them had to deal with the real life consequences, the experience to temper that enthusiasm. Then add to that the fact that many of these new voters will still be in school, a school system heavily influenced, dominated even, by those who want to bring socialism and government control over more and more of our lives. So younger voters are a perfect way to advance a certain set of political agendas. Let's see. Let's do this one. Let's do Washington, DC statehood. This has been Washington, D.C. has been a political football for a lot of years lately. And basically there's a group, they're looking for politically safe representatives. They want representatives from these politically safe groups that just push, they push their agenda, and they expect Washington, D.C. to be full of people who push a particular political agenda. So they want them to be a state. See, the Constitution requires that the nation's capital not be in any state. Yes, when the nation first started, our capital was New York City, until we could build Washington, D.C., which happened, I think it was just before 1800. And there are people who go, oh, but people in D.C., they have a lack of representation. But really, as far as I'm concerned, that should fall on deaf ears. See, those who live in D.C. have chosen to do so. Now, they have a voice in the House, although, yes, it does have limited voting rights. They have electors for president. What they don't have are senators, because they are not a state. And, as progressive and socialist and centralized control leaning as that city is, why wouldn't those who promote those ideas want them to have votes in the Senate? Again, pushing the balance of power. And notice, none of these seem to deal with making your life better, but with promoting a certain political party with a certain political agenda. Which brings me to my last takeover of the day, and that is government-run healthcare. Now, you may have thought that all this talk about government-run healthcare was won when the Affordable Care Act was passed and was actually upheld, I think erroneously, by the Supreme Court. But a quick look shows that the ACA has made healthcare neither more affordable nor easier to access. More and more of this doomed project has been found incompatible with our Constitution and with our federal system. Now, to quote Albert Einstein, the definition of insanity is doing something over and over again and expecting a different result. Insanely, Washington is again trying to take control over our healthcare system. They're making false promises of ease, efficiency, cost, 3 words never associated with any government program. Do you think of ease, efficiency, and cost when you think about the DMV? When you think about going and paying your taxes? When you think about the IRS? When you think about the EPA? Do you want agencies like that running your health care? See, this time the plan is they want to turn Medicare into our national health service and to make sure you join by making it illegal to compete with that. So they're not going to offer a new service. They're not going to say, hey, here's an option, get your insurance from the government. They're going to say, no, you have to. They're going to create a monopoly. The only monopoly you really have to worry about, that is a monopoly that is a government-backed one. With all this scream and cries about, oh, Google's a monopoly and Facebook is a monopoly, and we have to break them up, why do we want to turn the government into a healthcare monopoly? See, when I was a child, I was taught not to be a sore loser. Sadly, it appears being a sore loser is almost a prerequisite for some in politics. Not a surprise, Washington said this would be the case as one party looks for revenge over the other. See, I don't mind people who think they have a better idea trying to convince others. If you think the Electoral College is bad, be my guest. If you think a national healthcare system, be my guest. I don't even mind them trying to change the rules. What I can't abide is breaking the rules to get their way. I guess if you've been taught that the ends justify the means, then anything up to and including bullying, theft, and lying is fair game. And that seems to be a pretty good description of the political class these days. So unless we want to be bullies, thieves, and liars, I think it's time we started hiring a better class of politician to represent us. So I hope you enjoyed this little talk through some of the plans of our sore losers in Washington and in some state houses. I hope you now see what is behind these projects and will act accordingly. I see a lot of discussions about what can we do? Well, the answer is I believe we need to educate ourselves and we need to hire a better class of politician to represent us. I don't think we can get to that better politician until we have the education, which is why the Constitution study is here. So that we can read and study the Constitution, so we can teach ourselves and the rising generation to be free. That's what John Jay said. That's one of the founding concepts of the Constitution study. And that's why I bring these things to mind. I'm trying not to be political. I'm trying to look at this constitutionally and understand that what we're talking about is not only the future of our nation, but the nation our children and our grandchildren will live in. So I hope this made you think. I hope maybe it made you look a little deeper. You can find some more information on a lot of this on the website, constitutionstudy.com. I hope you enjoyed this little talk, and I hope to see you again the next time on the Constitution Study. Have a great day.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line